And then they find units on Zoom. Oh, what? Oh, let's see. I was like,
is it because of the noise like it did before?
I can look at units. Okay, that's fine. Hopefully, it just wants to do a 360.
That's what I did.
Yeah. Yes, you can today.
Okay. Hi everyone. Hi online. Hi in person. Thanks for joining today. There are no alarms scheduled for now. So if the alarm goes off the fire alarm, then the fire escape is at the back of the room. So you can make your way through there. Yeah, thank you so much for attending, everyone. Thank you to the speakers. So we have Deidre Leyden, who's also known as Dee. She is the GOSH BRC PPI manager with years of experience in patient and public engagement and involvement. Dee helps run the parents and career carers, advisory groups and YPAG within the BRC. Dee also works closely with Claire Edel, who is online today. Is that true? Yes. Okay. Claire is the PPI manager in NIHR GOSH Clinical Research Facility. The other speaker we have is Lisa Edel, who is a senior physiotherapist in GOSH. Lisa has recently undertaken a GOSH BRC research hospital internship, working towards a submission for a DCAF in her project. Does mechanical insufflation exsufflation impact on dynamic upper airway collapse in children with spinal muscular atrophy? We don't like to know. Lisa also has recently been appointed as a Junior Faculty PPIE representative, and we're grateful to have her delivering this session, along with Hannah and Alex, who will introduce themselves shortly, I'm told. Actually, I have something to say about you. We're very pleased to announce that you are two special guests from the YPAG, who will be helping to the session. And yeah, we're grateful for your time as well. Thank you for coming. And we look forward to hearing your session on how to write an effective plain English summary. Over to you.
Right. I think you're turning this slide, aren't you?
Am I?
Oh, I am.
But it's not very good.
Great.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for the introduction. So just to start off, if you look at the first slide, we'll see that originally it's called How to Write an Effective Plain Summary. So we've already plain English for us. So jump up and think what makes a good plain English summary. So yeah, my name is Deidre Leyden, PPIE manager for GOSH BRC and across the Institute of Child Health. And I'm here today with Hannah and Alex. Do you want to just say a quick hello and a bit about yourselves?
And I'm Alex, I'm the YPAG members. I've been a member of YPAG for just over 4 years. And in my spare time, I'm also a medical student.
And hi, I'm Hannah. I've been a member of YPAG for 3 years now. And I'm also a medical student. I just finished my first year at Cambridge.
Just finished this week. Yeah, and it's really great because how this has worked out, because Hannah and Alex and some other YPAG members actually gave feedback to Lisa on her plain English summary. So it's really lovely how we've actually managed to come together now. We'll be able to tell you the story of that today to make it more sort of real life as to what goes into this work. So it's great. It's worked out that we're here together to do this.
Sorry to interrupt you very quickly. I forgot to say that the meeting is being recorded, so if everyone is happy with it, that's what's happening. Okay,
great. So I think we're going to go straight in, Lisa. You're going to help us with this.
Yeah, so if you guys can scan the QR code, and then it should give you 3 options as to what does a plain English summary mean to you. And hopefully, if my technology has worked, we'll start to see a word cloud start to appear as people.
This is just to give us an idea of what people think. We don't think there's any right or wrong answer, but we just want to get an idea of what comes to mind when you hear the word plain English summary. Just be honest with us. It should be, yeah. And this will be really helpful as well for us when we're doing training in the future, so that we can show this.
And we have
This is what we think it should, so this is what it means. Is there anybody in the room that could just, or anybody wants to shout out that when you think this, is this what you think it should be? And is this what you think you're doing? Or should be?
Should be.
Should be.
Where did you hear this? Who told you this? Or did you just think this yourself?
Oh, now it's good.
Word editor from the link that you can. Yeah.
Set it to the page to use it for the
So
In Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
I did it on Build and they went, I had to make it.
So that would be interesting when we hear Lisa's story actually. So do you think then, was it doing the work for you, did you feel, or did you?
It was suggested by, and some of the why I would stress if it's at age 11,
Yeah,
or the cat
okay. Okay. Got mixed, okay, that's good to know.
I think there are, the more people write it, so understandable, clear, and easy to understand probably the
Non-science. Yeah, I like that there's inclusion in there as well, and collaboration. Okay. And then, do we have this on Mentimeter?
No.
No. So just shout out, or people online as well, because we want to make sure that you're included. What do you think the challenges are then in terms of writing a plain English summary? So for junior faculty members, what do you think challenges might be? Maybe not even to yourselves, but to other people that have not done this before. So,
Maybe keeping it pithy, like you can explain complex things, but how to keep it short and like understandable, because there's a lot of different acronyms, especially in biology, and sometimes just even spelling that out takes up a deep presentation.
yeah, and we were talking about word count as well. We can take up your word count at the same time.
I think sometimes you need to explain things within your explanation. Sometimes you're so far into a topic that seems obvious to people that then when you begin to explain it, and you need to, there's like so many levels of explanation within, and then try to keep it short.
Yeah,
I'm just sharing what's on me.
great.
Soraya says, explaining difficult, complex concepts. Flavia says, getting rid of jargon, really using and simplifying complex work.
Yeah, lots of challenges.
Yeah, it's probably not about the complexity of something, but it's about the words. We are used to speaking scientific terms, and it's difficult to translate it to the way so to let it.
And the messaging within that as well.
Yeah.
So when we come on to that in the slides, because it's not, although something like word editor will take a word and change it, it's about what's behind that then, what you're actually trying to say. Do you want to
Yeah, I think one of the challenges I think is that people might not understand issues. And I don't mean it in terms of people who don't have English as a first language. I mean as people's understanding and comprehension is at a lower level that I think we as scientists generally people
Yeah, just to be aware of that as well. And that's about inclusivity as well, isn't it? Thinking, don't assume. I mean, I keep hearing different ages now, just assume that the average reading age is, I just think don't assume anything when you're actually going into this, just, yeah. What's that?
Oh yeah, it's a combination of all of these things, just saying that you're the expert, you forget what people don't actually know about the topic or what it means, and you don't want to lose the meaning, so changing the word sometimes.
Yeah. Spot on, because we're going to get onto that in the slides actually. Can everybody hear us online?
Yeah.
They're all okay, yeah.
Can you all hear us online? Anyone say yes?
Yep.
Thank you.
Is that Ben?
Ben.
Yep.
Right, yeah, it's hi. It's really strange to sort of chat to people that are out there somewhere. We're still not used to it. And then reviewing. So our GOSH YPAG members, like, what do you think the challenge are? You've done a lot of plain English summaries and a lot of patient information sheets. What, just a couple of words that you think sum up what you think is a challenge from the person reading it to help researchers?
I think something that can be challenging is not knowing the constraints of the summary. So sometimes I read something and I'm like, that might need a bit more explanation, but then I know the word counts can be really tight, and trying to suggest ways that you can explain it in a more easy to understand way, but well, yeah, concise.
Yeah. So you're kind of thinking it really helping them from the researcher point of view. What are they up against? What are the constraints they're up against? You know, what are they struggling? But then you're trying to read it as a layperson or in sort of advocating for a layperson. And yeah, because you're obviously skilled, you two, so you're kind of experts now, but you're still thinking about it from a young person's point of view or somebody who's not. Yeah. Alex, did you have anything?
I think for me, when it's not badly written, but so much is assumed, or you're so deep in your project that you just assume people know what's going on. And so I read it and I can't even work out what's going on. So I can't start to think about suggesting word changes because it takes so much work to just even read. Like I'll get 3 pages in and still think, I have no idea what this is.
So that's a barrier already.
Yeah.
So a barrier to someone who's trying to help the researcher already.
Yeah.
Get in. Yeah, really, that's really interesting. Okay, great. So next slide, we'll come on to what is a plain English summary, which everybody's basically told us, which is great. So it should be clear, easy to read. This is in the ideal world. We'd say jargon free. What do we even understand? Somebody in YPAG actually said recently, I don't even like the word jargon. I know somebody younger wouldn't even understand the word jargon. So already now you've into plain English jargon. So we spend our lives plain English in the plain English. And to present an overview of the whole research study that people can understand on a first read. We were saying that's best case scenario that they can understand on a first read. So that's what the National Institute for Health and Care Research say. A public reviewer says if it's well written, somehow the whole application seems easier to assess and have an idea of what's going on. Yeah, so that makes sense to me. Who wants to take 2 minutes? Is that you?
Yeah. So thinking about what is plain English writing, for me, I think it's something which, firstly, I can understand the first time I read it. I don't have to go over it again. Something that's informative and gives kind of all the necessary information, but being concise and clear at the same time. It's also good if it's engaging, so you want to keep reading more and find out more. And another big thing is, of course, the terminology and making sure that any scientific language which is used is explained in a really clear way.
And Alex, who do you think the audience? So touched on this a little bit, but
Yeah, so it's about really getting to know your audience and putting yourself in their shoes. So a lot of the time in YPAG, if something aimed at 5 to 8 year olds, we sit down and say, okay, well, what was I learning when I was 5 to 8 at school? What would I have understood if I was reading that now? And even when we read it as medical students, assume we know nothing and work up from that, because unless I work in your niche field, I probably don't know what you're talking about. So yeah, just sort of taking yourself out of where you are and putting yourself into the person that's reading it in his shoes.
don't assume they're an expert.
Yeah.
In other words.
Yeah.
Even if there are other clinicians, they get that sometimes as well. So I think you were saying, Lisa, when you spoke to Graham first time.
Yeah, when Graham first read my proposal, he didn't have a clue what I was talking about. And it took him quite a long time to understand. I don't know if he's online, it took him a while to kind of get his head around what my project actually meant.
Yeah.
It was like, for me, I was like you guys said, I'm so ingrained in it, to me it made perfect sense. But when someone reads it for the first time, because you've gone over it so many times already by that point, you are in it. So it's trying to separate yourself out.
Probably stop seeing it as well, because you're so in it. And then why are they important? So somebody said to me recently, I don't know why they're important at all. Why am I doing it? You know, can you write it for me? And I thought, well, I can, but that's not really what I should be doing, and I haven't got time. But also, it's here to help you. Importantly, it's really a key part of funding applications, so it's expected. But you shouldn't just be doing it because you want to get your funding. And also, reviewers use it to review funding applications, so they'll go straight to that plain English and have a look at it. And if they don't understand it or it's not written well, it's already a barrier, so that's not good. And it might be used as a summary. So I think the BRC puts summaries in plain English today. Yeah, and that's as well to outwardly to think about our audience outside. So if somebody's looking at our website, somebody who's thinking about joining our parent care advisory group, or anybody who wants to get involved in research, they'll read something, and if they're looking at an organisation's plain English that isn't well written, they'll think, well, these people are not going to be really great to work with. So really, really important that it's there, and it's accessible, and it's inclusive. And then also it's a foundation to build. So you're actually investing in yourself. And I think you were saying this, Lisa, about yours, was that suddenly you have it, you've got this piece of information that you can then repurpose, as the comms team will say, repurpose it, it's there.
Yeah, and I think once you've written it and you've got it to where it needs to be, then that then translates, you can use it as a basis to then move on to your patient information sheets as well.
Yeah, so it's there at the beginning, so you've got the language, you can say, right now, I think about my patient information sheets and making them better, or even changing them as well, because things do change as you go along. So we'll just move on to the next slide. So what makes a good training summary? So this is some of the content. Not going to go into this in great detail. Just thinking about simply what the question is, what the impact going to be on patients. Keep the patient at the centre of what you're doing always. It always really helps to go back to that. Sounds obvious, but really, really important. And then just the background, the who, what, why, when, where, and how. What design methods you've chosen and why.
Yeah, another thing that is important to include is PPI. So how has that been involved in the research so far? The methods that have been used, as well as any PPI that is used in writing the English summary as well.
I always think that it's not just about doing the PPI work, but it's about the impact of it as well. So like doing it and then changing as a result of what we found out, not just doing it for the sake of it.
Yeah, big impact. To report on, that's really important. You want to say something about?
Yeah, so then we've got dissemination. So something that comes up in YPAG all the time is young people are actually really worried about how their information is going to be stored, how it's going to be shared. So just communicating that, and then also telling people, if you're part of this project, are you going to find out the results? What? Because a lot of people don't want to sign up for something that then they're never going to hear what happened. Because then what if they wasted their time being involved in it?
So that closing the loop. And we're asking people just to remember the words. Further on. So these are some top tips that you've all kind of touched on, which is great. And just to say also that the GOSH YPAG and other Generation R YPAGs have been working together recently on patient information sheet guidelines, and they're on the GOSH BRC website. It's a really nicely designed document. And on that is basically this kind of help as well. So you can go to that document and pick up all of these top tips, but there's nothing here that we haven't really touched on. I just think we had a chat outside, Lisa, about reading a draft. So not just going out to a patient group or YPAG to get some feedback on your draft. I think you should.
Yeah, I asked my husband to read it, who's a lawyer who had no idea about anything I do. And I also asked my 12-year-old to read it because she's kind of part of my type of audience, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
And to reread your first draft. So I don't know everybody who's written ever, you can go back to something and say, I can't believe I missed that typo, just didn't see it. If you're tired, all of that. So you just, and you need people who are helping you. You really need people like I feel that are really good at picking up on things, that won't just read it and go, sounds good to me. That always irks me when I send something, I get it back to me and say, it looks good to me. And then there's lots of online tools, etc. So yeah. Slide. So this is just some key messaging, and I think somebody said it earlier. Writing easy to read sentences does not always mean information is conveyed effectively. So you can pick up a word and say, let's simplify that word, but that doesn't actually mean then that you've got the information through to people. It's just a simpler way of saying something that people still don't understand, but you've made it simpler, and that's not helpful. Complex terminology, and again, we had a chat outside about this, that even sometimes people think, I have really made that understandable. And I'll speak to someone not coming from a medical background and go, I don't still understand what you mean. And to use everyday analogies, which we'll get onto in a little bit. And again, importantly, writing in plain English, the writer should not change the meaning of what they want to say, but they may need to change the way they say it. So it's thinking about, how am I saying this? Who's on the other end of this? Who's going to be reading it? And I think Ofra mentioned the different editing tools, but these slides will go out, I'd imagine, as well later. Yeah, so all of these are links to help people just have a little look at the different tools and everything that you can look up to help you when you're thinking about your plain English. So we're going to look at, so what we thought would be really useful is to give a real life example of Lisa's plain English summary.
I feel like I should give a disclaimer, but like when I wrote my first draft, I'd never done one before. So some of the words I use, even now I look back and think, oh, did I really write that? So, so my project, so I've just applied for the NIHR DCAP funding, and the project looks at what happens to children who have spinal muscular atrophy, which is a muscle wasting condition, when they use their cough machines. So in the very weak patients, we know that they can't cough very well, so they have to use a machine that enhances their cough. And what we want to know is actually what's happening within their airway when they use the machine. There's been a lot of research in adults, but nothing in pediatrics and nothing in this condition. Because it could then impact on how we clear their lungs and make them breathe better, but also in terms of living longer, less hospital admissions, and it could then reach into other conditions as well. So it's kind of a very brief summary of a 5,000 word proposal. But in terms of my plain English summary, we pulled out a few kind of key changes that we made. So my first draft, and I can't actually believe I said this, I said inheriting both copies of a faulty gene by carrier parents. And now I look back and think, oh, that was a bit harsh. but
that's okay.
Yeah, it's always a learning process. And that then became spinal muscular atrophy, SMA, is a life-limiting condition, mostly affecting children. So we actually took out everything to do with essentially telling them that their parents gave them that disease. That's never something you really should tell people.
So Hannah's just going to give some background on that from a lay reviewer point of view. So what did you think, Hannah, about that for doing the review?
So for this point, we were thinking about the tone that was used, as well as equality, diversity, and inclusion. So for the tone, using faulty gene could be not really very easily understood by people without a background in that area. And as well as the scientific language, using the word faulty specifically, we thought might lead to feelings of blame, or did I do something wrong to pass this gene on? And then we also thought about how biological parents won't be the same as the patient parents, and making that more inclusive.
Then the next one was excessive accumulation of secretions. And that has now become, mucus builds up in the children's lungs, becoming thick and sticky.
So here we were really thinking about understanding. So it's not always about using words that are really complicated, but it's actually like the inner meaning for some words. So most people can kind of read the word secretion and they've probably heard it before, but what does that actually mean to the layperson? They're more likely to understand something like mucus. So actually really thinking about, if I've written this word, are they going to understand what I mean by it?
Then it's a cough machine involves using a mask or mouthpiece to provide a big breath in when the child breathes in, and then helping them to cough by creating a vacuum effect. I'm laughing because, like, in my head, I can now see, like, why didn't I write that in the first place? But, a machine called a cough assist mimics a cough, whilst the child temporarily wears a mask over their nose and mouth. Air is blown into their lungs to help them take a big breath in. This is then followed by creating a vacuum to help move mucus out.
So for this one, we were thinking about understanding again, and changing the language to make it easier to understand the first read through, as well as providing more information about the process of the machine, what the cough machine actually is for the patient who will be using it, because that could be a bit scary. Words like vacuum effect, people might not understand what that is.
And then the next one was 8 infrared cameras, and then that just became 8 cameras.
So we kind of picked up on tone with this one because the word infrared was kind of just there bluntly with no sort of explanation. And to non-medical people, that can kind of have connotations of like lasers or heat and things like that, which is probably quite scary if you don't know what it is. So actually, we just kind of found the word really wasn't necessary there. So either taking it out completely or finding a way to sort of explain that it is harmless or what the process is.
And then this is to ensure we have a patient-related outcome. And that became understand patients, parents and carers' experiences of taking part in the study and its impact on respiratory care.
So this one was thinking about the terminology that was used. We thought the medical jargon of patient-related outcomes was a bit distant, and to explain what the outcomes are and how it's actually going to be affecting the patients and their families was more effective than making it sound like it was just trying to tick a box of being, let's look at this outcome, really understanding what it is.
And then dissemination became sharing results.
So if you're paying attention, this is the word that we asked you to think about. And really here we just picked up on the use of terminology and jargon. So it's not a word that's used in everyday life. And if you're not within the research field, you probably wouldn't know what it means. So just plain English it, just use a word that everyone understands.
Just plain English it. That's our answer. Plain English it. But I just want to say thank you, Lisa, because I don't think it's and again, this was constructive criticism and we were all working together. And not to take it as criticism if you get feedback, people have put lines in place to help you. So thank you for being here.
I look at it now and think, why did I write like that? But then I think if you've never done it before, or if you but like I said at the beginning, you're so ingrained in your project that to you, compared to what the actual full kind of the whole document looks like versus what the plain English looks like. Actually, the plain English is much more simple compared to what the actual document, completed proposal looks like. So you're comparing it with something that sounds even more complicated. Yeah. So for you, it is more simple. But and it's interesting because when I was listening to kind of the bits you picked up on, now I look back and think, well, that's exactly what I meant, and that the way you took it was the way it was meant to be taken, and actually changing it made it much better. Very good.
We're just going to finish up with just a Q&A with Lisa. And any other questions? So over to you, Alex, please.
Yes, we found out a bit about your project, but could you kind of talk us through how you went from the first draft of your plain English summary to kind of the final product?
The journey.
Well, the first thing is that I tried to write down everything that I thought the project would involve, because it was quite complicated, and like we said at the beginning, Graham couldn't understand what I was trying to do, so I tried to take each section out and take the medical terms out and then make it into something that made a bit more sense. It took a really long time actually, and far longer than I was expecting. And as I went through it, and I kind of went, okay, well, this is the bit where we're going to start, then we're going to move on to this section, and then we're going to do that, and then we're going to do that. And actually, because I broke it down into the sections of the proposal, it then didn't make much sense. So then you go back through it again, and multiple drafts later. And I think that it just took a really, really long time to get even to the first draft that you guys read, which has then changed massively since. It took a really long time to get to that.
So a lot of work needs to go in, and I say this a lot to researchers, please put the work in. We're here to help you. Please meet us halfway, but putting the work in and say, look, here's 3 drafts, but now I need some help. Instead of just saying, here it is, plain English for me. But it did go through quite a lot. So I remember reading it and going, oh, that's been turned around. It's on here now. But that was fine because and I think sometimes it's got to get worse before it gets better in a way. It needs to be pulled apart and then.
Yeah, and you do have to get it apart, and you have to not be precious, even though it's your work. You have to kind of think you're doing it to make it better. So, people aren't trying to not be kind, they're trying to help.
Yeah. Should you get a question, Kate?
Sure.
So what were the sort of challenges you came across? Were they ones you were expecting? Did you not anticipate them?
So the biggest challenge for me was trying to make it sound not scary or daunting. Because essentially the project involves putting a very small camera down children's noses and looking at what happens to their airway. And trying to explain that in a nice way is quite a challenge. And I suction people for a living, so to try and turn that around and make it not scary to someone reading it was probably the hardest part. And even something like the infrared cameras, in my head, I didn't even think, infrared is scary because it doesn't go anywhere near me. But actually, when you think about it in more detail, it could sound scary. So I think that was for me the biggest challenge, making something that isn't painful and doesn't hurt, and it might be a bit uncomfortable, but it's not going to cause a child any pain. Making that sound okay was quite difficult.
I think that's shying away as well from the reality, because what you don't want to do also is
lie.
Say, this is fine, it's going to be, you're not going to feel anything. It's like when a nurse says, oh, sharp scratch, you'll be fine. Straight away you go, sharp scratch, and it terrifies you. So
you're trying to stop that preemptive reaction. You don't because when someone says such, I'm not sitting there waiting. But so those are the key things for me that I found really hard. But then also, a lot of my patients I looked after for a really long time, and suctioning is part of their life. So a tube going down their nose actually isn't that foreign to them. But trying to, like, other people reading the project aren't going to know that level of information.
Well, even hearing the word suctioning now, I'm thinking.
It's kind of in
Yeah,
there.
it is that. You do think, don't you?
Yeah. So yeah, that was quite hard. I think the bit that I didn't expect the most was I actually quite enjoyed writing it, and the process that you go through, because like I look back now and I'm actually like quite proud of what it became, and I quite enjoyed going through that. And I never thought when I started my internship in November that I'd now be the PPI Junior Faculty rep. Like that was not something that I ever thought would happen. But actually, it's really nice that it has. So.
And our third question is, what key learnings did you take away? And if you could go back, would you do anything differently?
Well, I wouldn't put faulty genes by your parents. That would be my first thing I would do. I think the key learnings are you need a lot of time to do it. So just like ignoring the rest of the proposal and the budgets and everything else that go with the applications, just writing the plain English summary takes a lot of time. You need to start early and make sure that you've got time to do it. One thing I wish I had done was kept a spreadsheet of who I sent it to and when, and then what the feedback was, because there were so many drafts and it kept changing and kept evolving. It was quite an iterative process, but you do kind of forget who's read it at what point and when. And sometimes I was asking someone to read it again, and actually it hadn't changed that much from the last time they'd read it. So keeping a better track of who and when and what they'd said. There's nothing worse than reading something, giving your feedback, and then someone's not acted on it, or giving you a reason why.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you said that, do you think it would be helpful that if it goes through different stages to say to somebody, instead of saying, here it is again, just say, here it is again, but I've highlighted bits that I've now made a second change, so you're helping the reader find what you need them to
for sure. But some of my stuff changed so much that actually there wouldn't have been anything to highlight, because it went from something completely different to something that wasn't even in there in the first place. So I think, yes, highlighting, and actually someone else who read my complete proposal, that is what I did, like I tracked the changes in the highlighted section and stuff. But I think when it comes down to the plain English, for the smaller changes, 100%, but I think if there's big changes, maybe, I think almost maybe track the changes or something that shows them what you've done would be useful. One thing that I wish I had known when I started was the word limit for my plain English summary. I didn't know until much further down the line. And when these guys first read it, I think it was 1,042 words, and it was only allowed to be 600. And I actually think that a lot of the words came out because they had to, but actually the feedback would have been far more useful if I had stuck to the word. But I just didn't know at the beginning.
That's kind of stressful, isn't it? Because then you've got something that looks okay, and then you think, now I've got to get it down.
Yeah, but then I also look back at the 1,000-word one, and there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't need to be in it. And like you add in explanation, sometimes it can help, but sometimes adding too much explanation then complicates things as well. So I think having that word that does make you focus as well and take out the waffle. And then the other thing which I found really nice is just to close the loop. So send them the finished draft and communicate, and obviously thank them as well, because like they've given up their time for you as well. So I think that's something.
Close this evening,
exactly.
A session on summaries. That's amazing. Yeah, thank you. So we've just got to open up to any questions. Yes, great.
I guess you'll be looking at the thing. Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. I personally don't have much experience with writing plain English summaries, but I'm quite excited, as you say, to start doing that, because I think it will help me also to understand my project and make sure that I am doing everything the right way. You can put it in some plain English, like trying to say this in why or something. It's really helpful. And yeah, I know I have experience of talking to my family and my dad making up his version of a plain English summary for me, like, oh, the naughty DNA does this, but obviously that's not quite right, but it's quite useful also for me to family about these things.
I come from a family of non-medics, like no one else in my family does anything resembling anything to me.
Yeah, thank you, that was very helpful. I'll kick off with one question and then I'm sure we'll get more, and if not, I have questions. So I have this irrational fear of being condescending when I'm trying to explain to someone who I know doesn't really understand. Is there any risk in this sort of thing, summary? Do you have to worry about being too basic, or is that basically the point? and to take away that element of thinking that you know more and trying to way simplify it or something.
I would think factual thinking about that is good. Start with. So somebody who's even thinking, I don't want to come across as condescending, you started the work already by that. So sort of being on your own shoulder.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is just talking to people. It's just, I was thinking as you were speaking, how maybe it would have been better if we'd had a little small focus group where you would just come and speak about your project and start there.
Yeah.
So you start the work at the very beginning before you even put it together, just to say, this is what I'm doing. What do you think about this language? Would you understand it? Do you think I'll be talking down to people? So it's just about reaching out and starting there even before you put this together. Do you think? Would that?
Yeah, I think like get to know your audience.
Yeah.
Like I think in YPAG we've done things before where researchers have come with like they've worded the same thing 3 ways. They've been like, okay, vote for which one makes the most sense.
Yeah. Because I was thinking a lot of this work actually starts for some of the researchers in YPAG. So they'll come and they'll speak, and we try and train people up to speak in a Leyden English way and to be engaging. And yeah, I forgot about that. So they'll come and say, I can say it this way, this way, this way. What would you say? And people go, absolutely not. Not too sure. Could you change it to this?
Yeah.
I said none of the above.
But in a way, but again, it's a two-way street that we say a lot with YPAG anyways, that we're respectful to researchers as well. We're in this together. So it's about us not being too critical. Say, because you're doing your best. Yeah. And sometimes I'll meet people and they'll come across as very formal and they speak formally because that's just the language they know. And they speak in a scientific way and that's just the language they know. And, I think, Julie, you were one of the first people that I met actually to do a YPAG session at Stanford as well. Yeah. I remember us sitting down and we going like, what exactly is it? Think about how can we say it? And as long as you're willing and you want to make that, plain English as plain as possible, then we can work with you. It's tricky when we have people that will send something and say, over to you, do it. I think it's fine. As you said, you can't be precious. You're there.
No, like you have to value the feedback you get because ultimately you've asked people for feedback. So if you don't want it, don't ask. But you are asking for a point. So
and sometimes your audience won't understand, and that's okay. They really won't understand, but it's and then that's helpful for you because then you're learning about engagement in that sense because you're having to engage with somebody and speak about your science and your research in a way that is in plain English. So you're actually, and even the way you explained it today actually even made more sense to me.
But I think that's because I've been through this process and have learned to describe it in a better way. Yeah. But I definitely didn't describe it like that in the beginning. Yeah. And I think back to my internship interview, and I reckon if I went back and looked at those slides, it would not be the way I described it.
But again, to kind of not overanalyze or worry about it too much, because we had really good fun. So me saying to you, I don't understand. What is it? Listen, I'll go through it again. Okay, tell me again. What they do, step by step. So you put it there, you do that, and then suddenly it started making sense. So you were together learning. You were learning how to speak, I was learning how to understand.
Yeah, but it is quite not compared to some other projects, but in terms of like a allied health project, it's quite complicated. Yeah. And there's lots of different sections to it and like changes that happen throughout the course of the proposal. So to try and explain that to someone when you know so much about it, is quite difficult. Yeah. And it's learning how to describe yourself.
And it's tricky. It's like saying to somebody, you're fluent in French and now you have to speak in English and explain something that is in your head, and then you've got to be on your own shoulder, come out and speak in a different way. So we understand that.
Yeah, and I think when it's your baby, when it's like your idea and you've grown it and you've developed it, you're like, but how can you not get what I'm trying to tell you? Yeah. But actually, it's complicated.
Yeah, exactly. And also you're thinking about the funding application. So as part of the funding application, you've got a deadline. Yeah.
And you're writing the scientific version and the thing. So always at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you think the best starting point is not?
I wrote the plain English first.
Okay.
So for the internship, I had to present my idea. So I had to get to a certain point in it, even just to start writing the proposal itself. So I'd come up with like kind of basics. So I used that as to start with for my plain English. And I wrote my first draft before I wrote the full blown proposal. And then like I said before, it's very iterative and they both change as you go through it. But I definitely think that like where I started and where I finished were like polar opposites. Yeah.
I think that's
That's a good thing.
yeah.
Yeah, it's reading my first one back is definitely a good thing.
But that's good to know when you start with say faulty G, but you know what you want to say. It's helpful to have that in the first place. I think my instinct would be to write it the way I know it, so that I can then reframe it in a way that's
Yeah, and I guess it's easier to change it into plain English once you've got something down on paper, because then at least you're thinking about how it could come across.
We do a lot on YPAG when people come from patient relationship, for example, and they'll pick out words, won't they? We'll read out a paragraph, we'll get the owner to read a paragraph, and then when somebody hears it back, they think.
yeah. Oh, that was another question I had about like reading it out to someone and then only listening and not reading. Because when you see the words, you can almost a bit better.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just have a question. Do you think you then brought some of the kind of phraseology, or to use a massive word that you use, into the
Plain English economy.
I have to think of it, into the main scientific bit, because it actually makes it so much more understandable.
Yeah.
That people will understand.
I think it helped me make it more readable. So I think that obviously, like there are parts of the terminology that were interchangeable, but you almost reference the plain English, and actually you then say, well, for me, a cophocyst is also called mechanical interflation exflation, which no one's going to write in a plain English summary. But I actually used them both in the proposal. So I said a cophocyst, also known as. So then that way, whoever is reading my proposal can then know that they're interchangeable.
And they want to see that.
Yeah.
Earlier, they want to see that.
So I definitely think it improves the readability of the, well, I don't know, I have to find out when someone reads it, but I think it helps enhance the readability of it for sure.
You don't want to be your own barrier by putting in terminology that the panel can't understand.
No, exactly. And I think like with spinal muscular atrophy, there's so much quite not very nice language involved in it, because it's life limiting, and kids only used to survive to 2 years old. Obviously that's now changing, but like to get all of that in a less kind of in your face way is quite difficult.
The project proposal itself, so the camera that you mentioned and the hypothesis machine, is that an understudied intervention, or is it not well?
So there's a physio in Norway who does it in adults. So she so the cophocyst attaches via some tubing to a face mask, and then the camera goes through the face mask into the nasal cavity, and then sits kind of just above where all your kind of anatomy is at the back. And the camera then picks up what happens when you breathe in and then when you cough, and what happens to your airway. So whether there's lots of different levels in your airway, at what point it opens, at what point it closes. And the physio in Norway has done it with patients, in adult patients with ALS, and what's happened to them, because they have vulvar involvement with their condition, but no one's had a big enough cohort of children with spinal muscular atrophy to be able to do it with them. So I think there's one case study of a child, and that's it. So, and for me, I mean, obviously I want to be able to do the project, but it's massively under researched, because if what I think happens to the airway does, then it would change the way we describe airway clearance, or like for these children, and could massively change their disease progression. Because every time these kids get a chest infection, it weakens their muscles as well. So actually, if we can prevent a chest infection, then potentially they could have a much better
The patient numbers of GOSH.
of SMA in general. So SMA 1, which is the most severe type, we've got 65, which most people have like between 3 and 5. SMA 2s, we've got somewhere in the region of 80 to 90, and then SMA 3s somewhere about 50.
Do you think as labour, just thinking of lay reviewers, if you know the backstory to this, would that have helped you when you were reviewing? If there'd been, I'm just thinking now as we're talking, if there'd been a little synopsis, would that have helped? Sort of the story behind this, how you came to this, to then lead you in to read it, or would that have been another thing to just read and you think, oh, I can read that now, then I can read rather than wanting to play in English this story, but it's kind of, because now that's really interesting, that kind of backstory to it. That helps to kind of,
Yeah, I think to make it easier to understand why.
Why you're doing it.
Why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I don't pick that up. But I'm quite interested in, like, obviously what happens, because I have looked after a lot of these children since they were born and diagnosed. So a lot of these kids I looked after before those disease modifying treatments and have seen the progression. And I also see the ones that are now treated much quicker. And what we can't quite understand yet is why some of the children who get treatment young, in theory, should have a better disease progression. But for whatever reason or not, there are some that are just worse from a respiratory point of view and can't manage their mucus, and we don't know why. Like, they get the treatment early, they should follow a certain disease progression according to the research, but why is it that some of these children don't? And actually, do we just not know enough about what happens to their airway when we're trying to help them? And actually, are we not helping them at all by suggesting one?
And that's hard to get that to get that as an aside into a plain English summary.
It's really words.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
So I agree a little bit with stuff, but sometimes when you present my personal experience, when you present your draft with many people who have as many advices, as many options as people who have submitted the word of draft to. So in the process you presented it to the whole YPAG group, or you picked up some reference?
So I sent it to Deidre. Deidre did them.
I came to meet you all at
so when I did the internship, one of the sessions was PPIE and plain English. So Deidre came to meet us all as interns and kind of said, this is what I do. And then from there, I was like, well, I've written this. Did you have a look at it? And she's like, well, actually, have you got any funding in your internship for the YPAG? And I was like, well, yes, I've got this. And so then Deidre sent it out to these guys. Picking up on what you said, I tried really hard to not send it to people until I had the last draft back, because otherwise you can have multiple people changing similar things for different things. So I tried to wait till I got the feedback from the last draft and then make changes and then resend it on from there, rather than just sending it out all the
I
time.
think what people really like as well is if you're not going to make a change for whatever reason, tell people why you didn't, because you're in a way educating people as well. So you'd say, well, I wouldn't have made that change because then that wouldn't have made any sense further down the line, but thank you. I think what people really like is when you can see, it's really nice to see, oh, that's what I made a change, but why didn't they make that change that I told them? That was really important. So again, you're kind of engaging and educating people as well to say, well, you're not making a change. But the more people involved, sometimes the trickier it becomes, because, and that's why if you have a smaller group, I think it's sometimes easier. But what I usually do is I'll send it out to the YPAG. Not everybody's interested in doing this. Or sometimes if it's specific people that I know like doing this kind of work and are really good at it, or people who are learning, I'll send it out and say, no stress, just have a look at this. Any feedback is great. But yeah, it's the more you have, sometimes the harder it becomes. And sometimes you're doubling up on, you're hearing the same, which is great. You're thinking, oh yeah, I do need to change, opposites or whatever, something else. But yeah.
So going back and doing the question, do you ever get conflicting advice? Someone says do this and that.
All the time.
Yeah, so they can take one and not the other. Depends on.
Yeah, I think you also, in the back of your mind, you know the project better than anyone else. So if you get conflicting advice, you have to think about what then makes the most sense as the project as a whole. So it might be that there's part of it, like that actually someone, quite often this is my husband who does this, he'll suggest a change. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And I'll ignore his change because it doesn't fit with the, other information. Maybe I'm not
It's tricky though, isn't it?
But it is quite hard to
And that comes to the meaning bit.
Yeah.
What am I saying? How am I saying it? How's it across?
But equally, even if you don't change it, you might not change that section, but you might change the bit before or after it to then make it flow better so that you then can understand.
Because you did that, didn't you? You ended up sort of moving.
I took out
so
a whole
many
section.
Yeah, that's right.
Just completely changed, with the whole faulty gene, but just completely changed the whole
That's
sentence.
right. Yeah.
So, because it just made more sense. And
Yeah.
It was easier to understand and was more plain.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people think plain English is take, as we said earlier, you take a word and replace it with a word, but actually it's the bigger picture. It's not, it can be that, but it's not just that. Did you find that reading it?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like, as you're reading it, like, do I understand the overall sort of gist of the project, not necessarily do I understand every single word?
And what's the story? What's happening here? You know, where do you want to get to? Where are you now? That's the who, the where, the why, you know, stick to that as well. But sometimes people can go off on a tangent and, yeah.
Do you have any questions on that?
Can I ask my question? You mentioned something about like funding the YPAG. What did you do with it?
Yeah, that was my question.
How
How does YPAG work?
If you had any funding that you could offer,
Yeah, so like for these guys, as part of the internship, we had funding for PPIE, and part of that was I then used to give these guys Amazon voucher as a thank you for reviewing the.
because it takes time.
Yeah, of course.
So and anyone I part of my proposal, I did some online interviews with my patients and parents, and then again the same thing, I gave them an Amazon voucher online as a thank you.
And funders look at that as well. So if you're there going for funding, they want to see that you actually have patient involvement in your budget. You use that money and you said, right, this was to get the feedback. And we're investing in our PPI. Yeah.
So thank you. To be honest, it's the best money I spent, because one of the things that came out of some of my PPIE work was one of my patients said, like, whilst I can understand what you want to do, actually a video of what you're doing would be the best. And actually since then I'm now getting an animation about the project. So, and that's like invaluable, which I never would have probably come up with without that.
And I think that's one of the nice things about PPIE is that actually they come up with ideas. People come up with ideas all the time, and you're like, oh, that's really good. I'm going to take that and I'm going to use that. And I think that is, I think that is such positive from PPIE or PPI. So all the PPI that I've done, I've always managed to get something. Yeah, always a nugget.
But like someone else said to me, well, how are you doing disseminating to people that perhaps can't read so well, and things like podcasts and those sorts of things. And it all comes out when you talk to people about your project. I think it's really useful.
It's fresh eyes, fresh ears, isn't it? It's just what it is. Yeah.
What I find difficult is you mentioned about condescendence, and then you mentioned about speaking different language, French English.
I use that.
I think what's difficult is to get the cursor right, not to oversimplify. You need to simplify, but you don't sometimes have to which stage you need to go to make it understandable. So I think, of course, feedback is helpful. But when you write a first draft, for example, that's quite commonly something I'm thinking about. You need to be able to. That's too easy, and that's just stupid, too late. So lay, or that's just.
I always think of the episode from Friends where, I don't know if anyone here watches Friends, but Jerry wanted to write a letter to recommend his friend to adopt a baby, and he wrote it he used the thesaurus on Word to like make everything sound really complicated. And then he plain English it, and then they thought the child had written it, and they were like, this is great. And now I always think about that when I'm like trying to simplify something.
Yeah. Do you think it should be, I was thinking about lifetime reviewing, do you think it would be, like Julian said, it would be good to have the lay, the layer than lay, different like, and then it could be the no, do, don't take from this, try out different, maybe it could be that you try out different levels yourself. So.
Yeah, maybe. We're trying to try to adjust. We know rapid audience as well, but that's general public. But I suppose that's sometimes difficult to know if the language the terms are using will be well understood by the people that could be reading your proposal. You don't want to change the meaning. So.
Yeah. I think what we found in YPAG as well is that if a researcher puts something, can you just say what was the name of the again, the long
Mechanical insufflation.
amazing.
Well, you can't remember that.
No, I can't remember that. But we find at YPAG people really like learning those because a lot of the children young people are going forward to work in the field of. So it's not that people don't want to know the word, because in a way, is that condescending to not tell them the word? Why would you? But then beside that, say this means. So people go, I've read something. When you play English, you play English bit, but it's still the you just said. But yeah, did you find that in YPAG when you? Because now you're studying, see words that you.
It's definitely interesting to have more information, and I know it's for the patient information sheets to do something that I always ask for is having links to more information, so that you keep the summary very clear, but you also have access to more information if you want that. So maybe with the lay English, having a very simple option, and then thinking maybe I could add this with this be helpful.
Are you allowed to do that? Not sure.
I don't think you can put links in the proposal.
But maybe in the animation finally, you can have a link or something there.
Yeah, probably that.
Or we could, or the lay reviewers even, we could say, here's to go
You
review
could-
some more.
You could, what I was going to do with the animation was at the end have the, have a QR code to all the different, patient information sheets. So then that way they can watch the animation and read it, and then
Yeah, it's a
hopefully
really
they'll
good
be able to be like, oh yeah, that's what she meant.
Yeah, you'll need to come back to us now. Sure. With all your funding.
I'm telling.
Do you have any questions online at all?
Anyone got questions? Not that bit. Anyone online have any questions?
Flavia's online.
I'm just thinking, because now everyone's going to be in with requests that they make work. That's how big is the capacity to take on people?
We cannot take on loads and loads and loads, but we ask people to do as much work as they can themselves. We've got a very small team ourselves, so yeah. But we're hoping that with this training, people will learn something from this, and also the patient information sheet guidelines that the young people put together. It's got a lot of information in there as well to help people structure their plain English summary. But we do say it's not just us. If you go out, as you said, if you go out to people that are not from your background, they will help you. It's not, they're the people that are there to help as well. So not just us, because we're kind of expert by experience as well. So,
but then I think if you've got loads of, like, if you do it early enough and you've got time, like, for example, I remember when I sent it to Deidre the first time, she was like, look, we can't do it now, but I'll get it back to you in X number of weeks. So as long as you've got enough time to wait for that feedback, then I think that these guys will try their best to get you back what you want.
but worst is last minute because we want to help, but then we can't.
Just on like what typically, like how quickly do you want to do it? Because obviously I think what we plan on like this.
Well, two very busy medical students. So I always think, so I would be the gatekeeper to YPAG group, so I'm very good at saying, no, you can't do something because I know how busy young people are. So it's never a, you have to do it, or in what time frame can you do it? It's what's your schedule like at the moment? And we know that next year we'll be so busy. I think Alex will go quiet for a bit because she'll have too much to do herself. Hannah might have a bit more time, she might not. So it's a very difficult question to answer. The circumstances change a lot, and that's why we say don't just rely on this group, because that's not fair. But there's other groups out there, there's other specific patient groups maybe attached that you could reach out to, different charities, even take the guidelines with you and say to them, this is what we need. But yeah, there's other groups other than ours, but we're here to help if we can. But yeah, unfortunately, we can set up a whole.
This for the parents of the kids, so I got them to read it as well.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, actually. Yeah, set it out there as well.
I mean, they're expert in the condition, but like obviously not in research or things like that.
Okay. So is it the tea and cakes? Yeah, so we've got a little bit back. Brett had to leave, so I am the substitute. I'll try and be as good. Nibble it back, and then you can interact with our panel and then ask any questions. And thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone online. We'll see you soon. Next time. Bye.